Gothic friends, this is Alice and you are in Gothic Land, a place where we talk about all things Gothic, where we create awareness and we create transformation. So transformation, why do we need transformation? Because when we transform, we create beautiful things, we become better writers. I've got a hair on my face. We become better writers, we become better speakers, we become better communicators, we understand better ourselves, and therefore we perform a lot better in our lives. So independently of what you do, knowing about your Gothic side is going to open infinite doors. So you are here after so many days now. This is the 8th, not the 9th day. Tomorrow will be the 10th day after this live series on defining the Gothic in modern times. And when I say modern times, I mean contemporaneous moments that we live in. Up till now, I've been giving you a lot of insights regarding the Gothic. I've been trying to demystify some of the ideas, false preconceived ideas about the Gothic. We've gone through very, very briefly everything because the Gothic needs a lot of time, it needs a lot of explaining. But we looked at most important books, periods, main definitions, elements, and today, this week, we've been talking about those aspects that make the Gothic really, really important. Like we've talked about the Uncanny, we've talked about the Sublime, we've talked about the importance of folklore, and what I want to talk about today is the Otherness. These are very important aspect, also connected to folklore somehow, connected to the supernatural, is connected to a lot of the other elements of the Gothic. All right, so today to do this, I am going to be using some research that some of the writers that I found super interesting to give you visual examples, to give you quotes. So then when I'm talking, you familiarize with all these things. Before we dive in, also I want to remind you that if you like or if you've liked so far this content and you think it's been useful for you and it's created this beginning of transformation for you, don't forget that you can go to my website gothicalice.com and there you will see some free downloads. You will see that you have a contact page. You can write to me, you can book some time to talk to me privately, and then I can see how I can actually help you and see if we are a good match. And that's a free session. And you can also see future courses, my articles, subscribe to my blog. So there are a lot of things you can continue doing, as well as watching these videos and making notes. You can continue your journey by looking at all the information I have there for you. So now, yes, there are, let's always, I always like starting with definitions and describing the origin of words and terminology. So what are we talking about when we talk about otherness? When we talk about otherness, as the same word indicates, is someone that is not us, so is another person. So therefore, what we have here already is opposition. We have this binomial position that is necessary to talk about otherness, otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. So in order for otherness to happen, there need to be these two parts that either opposed or present differences between them. So I'm going to mention now one of the essays by Jean-Francois Stassac. I hope I've said the name right. This essay, in his essay, Otherness, he says that creating this term already creates this instant division I was telling you about before of people into groups. So we have on the one hand a group that embodies the norm and whose identity is valued, and on the other hand we have that of the group that is identified by its faults, devalued and susceptible to discrimination. So clearly we're already setting up some foundations to understand what the otherness is going to be embracing and is going to include, right? So this is very clear when we think about colonization. So you're going to see that otherness is a peak or a key point in Victorian times. So in this sense, we can see by this already brief definition and an initial attempt to describe what otherness is, we already see that it's going to fit perfectly well in a Gothic context. So the difference between the self and the other is very clear, not only with the colonized and the colonizer, but also when we're talking in general terms about, as I mentioned before, the supernatural, the mentally ill or handicapped, people with physical deformities. So automatically, what is that we see? We see that this term is used to stigmatize. But not only that, it's also used to differentiate between power, gender, and race. What Starsack points out as well is that it's precisely this binary logic that we have this close connected to the idea of the principle of identity that we saw in a way with the Uncanny as well. So this is super important in the Gothic. Identity is basic to talk about the Gothic. It's all over the place, and in the otherness is where we can actually explain this identity very well. However, this concept is not new to the Gothic, since it can be traced back to Aristotle, who talked about two things. He talked about the law of non-contradiction and the law of the excluded middle. I'm not going to go into depth with Aristotle because it's not the intention. The intention of these life events is to give you like general ideas, but bear that in mind because it's important. But it's also important as well, and we saw that when we talked about the period of the Victorian period, the intervention or the influence of Darwin. Why? Because with his theories, Darwin and his in Victorian times, he gave explanations to what? To certain monstrous behaviors, which then were used to exclude certain members from society. By excluding certain members of society, he relegated them to the realms of the Gothic. So what we have here are, for example, characters that could be represented as savages from different countries. This is, for example, the case of Bertha Mason in the Mad Woman in the Attic in Jane Eyre. Or also, if you remember about our Spanish, or my Spanish background, we have the Catholic representatives of the Inquisition in countries like my own in Spain, but also Italy, or Mediterranean countries with a similar background. So in this sense, also Starsack also refers to the term exotism, because being exotic is not it wasn't as bad as being the other. We still have this other aspect in it, but is something more appealing. So this is the most, he says, this is the most directly geographical form of otherness. Yeah, exotism. So it's more of a geographical form, because in that it opposes the abnormality of elsewhere with the normality of here. So we always have the colonizer as the one on a higher place, and the colonized as the subdued, the one that needs training, the one that needs educating, the one that hasn't got, that's got a very strong beliefs in supernatural and the folklore, and right, you see where I'm going with that. So if you think about it, this is a bit like contradictory, because there was this fear about the other, the one, the colonized, that we don't understand and we don't know, and we need to discover. But at the same time, there's this exotic attraction that starts in the 18th century, but then it moves on to the 19th century. When we see how people purchase things, objects, jewels, paintings, all these inanimated things that came from Turkey, China, Japan, and all these other countries that they were colonizing or they were traveling to. So we have that this initial rejection to the unknown, move to a different status of material possession. But not only that, it turned into spectacles, it turned into human zoos, exotic dances. So the word exotism has a lot of connotations, and it goes hand in hand also with fear, because if you remember these human zoos or the circus, we see again the physical illnesses, we see strange people that we're not familiarized with, that they used to think that the physical illness was due to some evil inside of them. Still, science had not demonstrated, had not enough proof to say this is an illness, and it can be treated, and it doesn't depend on your beliefs or because you've been possessed. Okay, so there was still a long way to go. We have another article that very interestingly talks about the otherness, and this is by Jean H. And the article is called Evolution of Otherness in Gothic Literature. What this researcher says is that with the advance of technology, development of psychology, and evolution of human society, otherness, which used to live in dark forests and isolated castles like we saw right at the start, have gradually walked into people's homes and even minds. And I think that is super important, because the monstrous, the otherness, goes from being this outside person, object, thing, mainly person, to be ourselves. Because we can also go from one day to the next, we can have this mental problem, and then the other is inside of us. We are the other. So in this merging, we see how now more modern Gothic is developing other ways of talking about otherness. So what we have, in addition, we have that this geographic distance, we have geography mentioned again, this geographic distance between the other and us has become a lot more shorter, while the feeling of strangeness still exists. And I think that vision is super important, and it's kind of beautiful as well. Yeah, we think that we are distancing ourselves from it, but in fact what we're doing is we're getting closer and closer to the other as we know more about it, as we are actually becoming the other in a lot of cases. And sometimes we have been the other at one point or another in our lives. When you travel, for example, to a foreign country and they don't understand you, so you can see this. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's a bit exaggerated nowadays, but yeah, we still have these barriers, we still have these walls. People still differentiate people from other people. We still have this class point of view of which is better, who's worse. So we have not really got rid of it. So if in the origins of the Gothic, the other was clearly defined and classified as a witch, a vampire, a ghost, a monster of any form, as humanity is moving on, so did this term. And as we have seen up to till this very present in our literature, and even closer to us. So this means that the other can be someone even that we know. It could be a family member, and as I said before, it could even be ourselves. So to illustrate this a little bit, think about, for example, Frankenstein. Frankenstein is the physical other, is the creature that human made, and is the thing that we can actually, if we don't want, we can reject, we can destroy it, although we have issues with that, as you know. And for this psychological monster, we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Why? Because is the one person that combines the otherness in itself, because it has good and it has evil, it has physical, it has mental, and is this unity that is so strange and so scary, and is again a different type of otherness. So if you want to know more about this, because I think it's fascinating, if you want to know more about this point of view, there's an article that you can find on Medium, which, by the way, I'm also on Medium if you want to follow me there. Alice in Gothic Land on Medium. There's a further reading on this topic that you can check out, written by Owen Morawitz, and his article is "The Monster is Never the Monster, Gothic Fiction and Otherness." And this is pretty beautiful because it takes you through different periods of time, through the Gothic, the main characteristics, things that we have been talking about here. He mentioned some already there. And if you want to extend that knowledge, please feel free and clap and subscribe to Medium, because there are fantastic writers there as well. So as for today's takeaway, I want you to think about this otherness. And I want you to think in terms of an important aspect in Gothic literature, but also in the Gothic mode, in this new way that we have of embracing the Gothic. So think about it as this concept, as a binomial concept that defines identity, right? Which is another element that we really should talk about. Let's see what we have time to do tomorrow, because it will be the last day. But if you've been liking this series, then we can continue working on the Gothic, and we can continue working on those areas that you find interesting or that you still have doubts about. So my question to you today is, have you ever felt like the other? Like when I said to you before, if you've traveled abroad, have people made you feel like this other, that you were different from them? And if so, what was your discourse? And how did that help you move on? Because we always learn from traumatic experiences like that, mainly when other people think that you are different, they let you know that you are not like them. So please let me know in the comments. And remember, if you want to keep updated with my new research, if you want to read my articles, gothicalis.com. Also, you will find there free downloadable PDFs that will help in your journey in the Gothic, and that can, as I said, can help you to create this transformation that probably you're looking for through the Gothic lens, and to know more and apply it in your everyday life. So if there are no comments and no questions, which I don't think there are, I'll give you a couple of minutes, right? So if there's no questions, then we'll move on to tomorrow, and I appreciate you being here. If you're watching this after the live event, then please leave your comments. Don't be shy. Don't think that you might say something that doesn't belong. It doesn't matter. It will be great, because a lot of people still do not know what the Gothic is. They're still not familiarized. They've got this idealized opinion or vision of people dressed in black all day, really depressed, and it's not everything. It's the Gothic is much more than that. So feel free to comment, and I hope you have enjoyed this live session as well with me today. So tomorrow, last day, remember, last day. If you want to watch all my other series, there's already the first 5 days from the first week already my YouTube channel as well. Everything is Alice in Gothic Land. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you can see all of them. I've opened there a folder with all the I've done a series, so you can watch them all anytime you want, with a pen and paper, making notes and learning tons of information from this. Okay, friends, so I'll see you again tomorrow. Have a nice evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on where you are. And thank you very much. Bye.